It wasn't that long ago that some of the most hype anime moments going came from a series that is now universally trashed. Despite that, one character has managed to keep their reputation clean. Today, I want to talk about how Escanor, the pride of anime, had one of the highest peaks I've ever seen, why the hype was justified, and let's do so using some of his most badass lines. Because for today only, I'm the one who decides. Awesome line aside, this is a fitting way to start because it really applies to himself. While Escanor was born into royalty, something that his sunshine form completely embodies, the trauma he dealt with early in his life made him someone who would absolutely apologize for being born. When his power first activates, he accidentally injures his brother and immediately gets disowned. Not a great fam. Due to his transformation during the day and the immense power he's granted, he's often referred to as a monster, and that really affects how he views himself. With the way his daytime and nighttime forms differ so much, he's kind of a reverse Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. After he's disowned, he's sentenced to death, something that seems to happen to him a lot. Thankfully, a woman named Rosa sneaks him out of the kingdom to safety. From there, his life sucks, and his reputation as a monster grows. Years later, he returns to the kingdom only to find that it's been destroyed and that Rosa is gone. No matter what he does, he's judged. When a monster wreaks havoc in town and he comes to save the day, he's assumed to be the culprit and wrongfully restrained. He's taken prisoner simply for defending himself, and his sentence for this crime is, you guessed it, death. As fitting a saying as there could be, because he's so powerful, the person who does the most harm to Escanor truly is himself. Both the daytime and nighttime form of Escanor embody trauma responses to his life. The meek, quiet man who loves poetry and lacks confidence, but appreciates the kindness of others is one way to deal with his trauma. Then the proud, arrogant man who turned his back on the world and rejects it because it rejected him, that's another. Essentially, he's been fractured into two different men. When he's sentenced to death, it's Meliodas who goes to bat for him and recruits him into the 7 deadly sins. Escanor has concerns, but his nerves are eased a bit when he meets Merlin. Her resemblance to Rosa gives him a sense of familiarity, something we'll touch on more later. The rest of the sins welcome him with open arms, but he can't accept being part of the group because he can't accept himself. He truly believes he's a monster and a perpetual danger to them, so he flees. As he attempts to do so, Merlin says he's quite interesting. For the first time in his life, someone views his ability in a positive light. This is the basis for his love for her. She saw him differently than anyone else did. The next day, Meliodas disobeys Escanor's pleas to stay away from him, which leads to him pimp-slapping Meliodas and Ban. He believes he's murdered them, so he leaves and his innermost thoughts spill out. He begs for someone to kill him. Again, we see he's his own worst enemy. It's Merlin who finds him, and this means something to him. His feelings for her grow. No one has ever searched for him before. It makes him feel all warm and fuzzy that she cares, but also, he killed her comrades and could never be worthy of standing by her side after that. Except, they aren't dead. Though that's not his initial reaction to seeing them, he gets terrified thinking that they're ghosts. They keep trying to show Escanor he's one of them. Gowther peeks into his memories to see why he has so much self-hatred. They learn of his past, and Merlin offers to find Rosa. Escanor rejects her, saying Rosa would be ashamed of him and he'd have nothing to say to her. So Meliodas determines the only way to get through to him is to change strategies. It's not about making Escanor feel like one of them, it's about making him see that they're just as monstrous as he is. He challenges the Lion Sin to a fight because he needs to make that point abundantly clear. They are all monsters, and that's okay. They are all trying to overcome their sins in one way or another. Meliodas wins their fight and tells Escanor that he can either throw away what Rosa gave him, or he can live, and Escanor wants to live. If that self-hatred returns, then Meliodas says he'll be there to keep things in check. For the first time, Escanor has a friend. They even go so far as to have Merlin send him to see Rosa in the City of the Dead, where she tells him she holds no ill will towards him. In fact, she's been watching over him the entire time, and she's happy that finally, he's no longer alone. We're going to veer off his story for a moment. We have to be honest here too. For as much as I love the first few seasons of 7 Deadly Sins, a huge reason it had a lot of hype was because of Escanor. Reactions to his debut, his biggest moments, and his fights were massive on YouTube. It's astounding how popular the Master of the Sun became in such a short amount of time. He was simply too badass to hate. The show's hype was at its peak in that 10-episode stretch where he went ham on everyone. Without him, the show simply wouldn't have been as popular. In that way, the cast and the show itself may be beneath him. He didn't have that much screen time, but like the sun, he shined brightest. Why don't we talk about some of those hype moments? His bait and switch with Galland has to be one of the greatest debuts ever. They allude to he and Bond knowing each other, they have Merlin's sin on his door, they flash his weapon, but he's still this shrimpy coward. When he says he can't fight but he's good at games, you think, oh, maybe he has a special ability. Nope, he gets KO'd from a shoulder tap and he's out for an entire day. It's all played off so comedically and it swerves us in an instant. His voice deepens, he easily lifts the axe with one hand, Galland couldn't live with two, he talks mad shit about being the pinnacle of all races, perhaps a bit problematic. Then we go from everyone laughing and having a good time to a one-hit mutilation. It's so quick and unexpected, and these are commandments who we've seen are insanely tough, and they're instantly put on edge. He easily tanks Galland's best shot with essentially a paper cut to show for it, and his move looks so terrifying that it gets this dude who knows if he runs he'll be petrified to run. Oh, and when his soul gets eaten, it's too hot for the demon and literally sets her heart ablaze. And again, these two have been shown to be terrifying threats to this point. It's incredible, especially when he's talking shit. Speaking of, he also gives us one of the greatest quotes ever, and don't worry, we'll get to it. One more detour here before we continue his story. Unlike the rest of his comrades outside of Bond, Escanor is a human, and even Bond is immortal. It's such a cool dynamic that a member of the weakest race is the strongest of the sins. And with that, there are rightfully significant drawbacks. For 12 hours a day, he doesn't have access to his immense strength. Not only does that highlight the fractured nature of the character, but it's a heavy restriction on his power, which makes him more interesting. Obviously, he gets his abilities from the sun, but I find it fitting that he's powerful in the day. It's almost like the sun is simply a spotlight to showcase him, and when the lights go off, it's beneath him. Of all the sins, Escanor is the only one who has a normal lifespan. Even without his ability wearing on him, he doesn't have the longevity of his peers. When you factor that in, and I have more to say on it, him being the one to sacrifice himself makes sense, as he has the least amount of time left to give. Also, it's awesome that he actually does human things. Escanor writes poems in his spare time. He's a legitimate business owner. His bar was fully stocked, so despite hiding it in a mountain, which isn't the best strategy, he had to have been doing decent business. It's a little detail that makes him feel different than the other sins. Let's talk about the battle with Gowther. When they are fighting in the Ten Commandments makeshift tournament, Gowther takes it seriously and even invades Escanor's mind to put him in a perpetual nightmare. In it, Merlin belittles the sin of pride, but as Escanor says, he is mighty and he remains composed. Merlin's rejection doesn't lead him to despair, she's a ray of hope. He disregards these actions and does what's right. He baits everyone into thinking he's attacking Gowther, only to catch the commandments off guard and destroys them for manipulating his friend. He easily could have won that fight, but the fact that he took Gowther's full-powered blast just to spare his friend's feelings shows what type of person he is. It's important to note this started when he was in his nighttime form, the more compassionate side, and only semi-transformed. Escanor vs. Estarossa, one of the coolest moments the show ever had and the peak of Escanor's trash talking. But there's an interesting detail here. Estarossa's commandment keeps anyone with hatred towards him from inflicting pain upon him. This doesn't impact Escanor. Why would he feel hatred for someone weaker than him? Well, I've got a reason. He killed your best friend. Having no hatred in his heart shows how fractured he still is as a man. The daytime version holds no emotional attachment, even after everything Meliodas did. It's a nice little detail because of where things go. If you're a fan of the Seven Deadly Sins, this fight ranked no lower than a top 3 moment in the show. The two most powerful characters we'd seen, one-upping each other with surprise after surprise, and concluding with that iconic line, "I'm the one who decides." It doesn't get much better. The anime butchered it, so I'm I'm not going to spend time on it, but Escanor vs. Assault Mode Meliodas should have been one of the coolest fights in anime history. It wasn't, but it did show us the peak of his powers. At high noon, he becomes the One, someone so powerful even Meliodas can't defeat him. Something I appreciate about his character are the callbacks and little details. When he's fighting Zeldris, he asks Escanor if he's a monster, and Escanor's response is basically, "Bruh, I'm gonna kick your ass like I did your brother's, and who knows, maybe I'll kick your dad's ass too." He's jealous of Merlin's affection for Arthur. He learns that his magical power is a grace from the supreme deity, one that originally belonged to Mael of the goddess race. That, and because he's a human, his body can't handle that power. The daytime version of Escanor is told to return it, which he immediately rejects. The nighttime version, on the other hand, offers to give it away, showing that these two pieces of him are still fractured. This all comes to a head in the fight against the Demon King. This is a foe that pushes Escanor to go plus ultra. Despite knowing the consequences of doing so, Escanor uses his life force to enhance his power and becomes the One Ultimate. He and the rest of the 7 deadly sins defeat the Demon King, but it comes at a great cost: his life. His death is beautiful for many reasons. The Daylight version of the character, someone who always proclaimed to be above everyone else, now sacrifices his life for others. He chose to push himself despite knowing this would happen. Symbolically, the daytime and nighttime versions of him have become one, and finally, he's whole again. And it's fitting that the show's most prideful character went out with a bang. It was the only way things could have ended for him, because his pride demanded a legacy fitting of a legend. The beauty isn't limited to that either. He confesses his love for Merlin, only she says he's too late. She wishes he would have found her sooner. He says no matter what she's done, he's on her side. His years of admiring her gave him insight into who she really was, a woman who had done terrible things and may go on to do more, someone full of regret, and her eyes showed it all. Before the embers of his life go out, she kisses him, burning her face in the process, a scar she'll never shed so that she can always remember the one man who loved her. And in his final moments, he recites a final poem for her. With that, I'm out.